Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video I'm sharing 5 easy projects that you can make from scrap wood. This video was sponsored by Creality Falcon. So for the last 4 years, I think that's right, my friend Katie from House Full of Handmade and I, we host what we like to call Scrap Wood Summer. Basically, every week during the month of August, we each share a scrap wood project idea on our website. This year, I decided to film each project and share it here as well. So welcome to Scrap Wood Summer YouTube edition. I have a lot of fun with this every year, so if you're ready to turn some scraps into something, let's dive in. I had some cedar scraps in the shop left over from several projects from over the years, and I thought it would be fun to use them to build a simple umbrella stand slash side table. To get started, I cut 4 equal size 2x2s to build the frame for the tabletop. I drilled one pocket hole into one end of each, then assembled the frame with pocket hole screws. Next, I cut 4 pieces of scrap 1x4s to fit inside. I installed these using pocket holes and screws, making sure to space them equal distance apart, or at least close. I didn't actually measure the gaps, I just kind of eyeballed them. I set this top aside to assemble the table base. For this, I cut 4 2x2s for the legs and 4 2x4s to connect them together toward the bottom. Again, I used pocket holes and screws to assemble the table base and installed the 2x4s about 3 inches up from the bottom of each leg. Then I could attach the base and the top at the corners. For this part, I used black timber screws. I thought the black accents would be kind of neat at the corners, but a regular wood screw would also work fine. I pre-drilled my holes before driving the screws, and this helps to prevent the wood from splitting, but it also helped me make sure that the screws I was about to drive wouldn't interfere with the pocket hole screws in the top frame. If my pilot hole hit a screw, I'd just move it over slightly and re-drill. So I'm going to be putting slats in here, just like the top, but on the bottom I'm going to use fence picket. So to give me something to rest the slats on, I've got these glued and clamped in here for the bottom slats. They're probably like 3/4 square. After I installed the bottom slat supports, I added the side braces before actually installing those slats. I've got this marked, so I'm going to use my speed square to tell me what angle it is so I can cut it on the miter saw. That looks like about 26 degrees. For this, I used scrap 2x2s and aligned a piece with the center of the top and one of the bottom corners. Then I marked where to cut. I cut 4 of these, 2 for each side, and they're a bit tricky to install just due to the angle. But I didn't want to overcomplicate it, as these are really just decorative and not for any kind of support. So I drove the screws at an angle through the top of each piece, then I flipped it over and kind of toenailed a screw through the bottom 2x4s to secure it at the bottom. I repeated this for both sides, then it was time to add the bottom slats. I didn't have enough 1x4 scraps to use for both the top and the bottom, so for the bottom, I used fence pickets. Okay, so I've cut my fence pickets here, and 2 of them will fit in here fine, full width, but a third one would not fit, so I did have to rip this one down. I ripped like an inch off of the edge, so it will fit in here. Now, since I'm going to be using this as an umbrella stand, all that's left to do is drill the holes for the umbrella to actually fit into. I measured and marked the center of my table, then I realized it was going to be in a gap. So I clamped a scrap board on top, marked the center on it, then used that to help me drill my hole. I drilled a hole about 1/8 of an inch larger than the diameter of my umbrella pole in the top. I also need to drill a hole in the bottom, but it needs to fit my umbrella base, and I hadn't bought one yet. So I went ahead and stained the table and then ran to grab a base while it dried. Once I had my base, I measured the diameter of the piece that the umbrella slips into, and I drilled out a hole in my center bottom slat a little larger than that. Then I placed my bottom slats in the table to make sure that everything fit and nailed them in place. And with that, this simple little table is ready for a sunny day, some fresh cut flowers, a cool drink, and a good book. I showed these pet head signs in a recent video, but I didn't show how I made them. Since they're made with scrap plywood, I thought it would be fun to include the how-to in this video. For this project, I'm using the Creality Falcon A1 Pro laser cutter and engraver with 20-watt laser. Personally, I love that this machine required very little assembly right out of the box and is practically plug and play, making it ideal for newbies to lasers like me. It comes with a smart touchscreen controller, and you can even design and create right from your phone using the app. Although, I'm still a bit old school and I still prefer using my computer. The Creality Falcon Design Space software is free to use and it's pretty intuitive to create all kinds of designs. So to make my pet head projects, I imported an image of Lucy into the software. You can erase and tweak the image right in the software, so I erased pretty much everything but her ears. Then I clicked the Trace Image feature so that I could get an outline of the shape. I offset this outline, then kind of erased and connected some parts in the center to get the finished head shape that I wanted. Then I just added some text for her name. One of the really helpful things about the Creality Falcon A1 Pro is that it automatically sets the proper speed and power settings based on your material choice and what you're wanting to do with the design. In this case, I wanted to cut out the head, so I select line cutting for that layer, and I want to engrave the name, so I selected fill engrave for that layer. You can see that it automatically changes the settings for each one. Then I select the type and size material that I'm using. The 20-watt blue diode laser can cut wood material up to 10 millimeters thick, but I was just cutting some 1/4-inch plywood, which is only about 5 millimeters thick, so I put that into the machine. Before cutting, I ran the autofocus feature, which allows the laser to set itself up for whatever type of thickness and material that's inside. You can also one-touch autofocus from the touchscreen. The built-in camera allows you to take a picture of the material that's inside the machine so that you can resize and position exactly where you want it. While this isn't really critical in this particular case, it would definitely come in handy if you were engraving on smaller, individual items like coasters or ornaments or tags. I had a lot of fun just watching the laser do its thing through the front and the top windows. I ended up making a couple of these, 2 for my friends' dogs as well. For specialty materials like engraving on acrylic, plastic, or raw metals, you can swap the original 20-watt laser with the optional 2-watt infrared laser in just a few seconds without any tools. This smaller infrared laser is an add-on and is used for ultra-high definition engraving, even on tiny items like jewelry. I just tested it out to engrave an image of Lucy on some black acrylic to see how it worked. So now that I have my pet images cut and engraved, I grabbed some 3/4-inch plywood and stained these to match the hair color of each pet with water-based stain. Then I glued the engraved pieces onto the front. Once the glue was dry, I trimmed the edges flush, then used some scrap 1x boards to add a frame around the edges. You can obviously skip the frame if you wanted. These are such fun little pieces to use as art around the home or to give as gifts. And of course, if pets aren't your thing, you could laser cut and engrave thousands of other things too. So if you've got more plywood scraps than you know what to do with, a laser cutter and engraver is a great way to put them to good use. You can learn more about the Creality Falcon A1 Pro at the links in my video description. I built this next project from 100% scrap plywood. I found some 3/4-inch strips that would work for the sides and the shelves, and a piece of 1/2 inch that would work for the back. I was kind of at the mercy of the 1/2 inch plywood piece to determine the size to make this, and it was about 16.5 inches wide. So I decided to mark and cut it 16.5 inches long to make a square for the back panel. Then I ripped some 3/4-inch plywood strips to about 5.5 inches wide to fit around the sides of my back panel. Because I was using plywood, I edge banded all the edges that will be exposed once it's assembled. It would have been a bit easier just to use solid wood for this, but I really just needed to use up this plywood, so it is what it is. I drilled pocket holes along the edges of the back panel and started attaching it to the sides to build a box. Once the sides were secured to the back, I used a few brad nails to secure at each corner. Then I ripped some more 3/4 inch plywood to about 5 inches wide to fit inside as shelves. I fit these inside with some wood glue along the back edge and then used brad nails to secure them through the sides. Then I cut 12 pieces of scrap 3/4 inch plywood to about 1 inch long to use as dividers. It was very tedious, but I did edge band the edges of all 12 pieces. I carefully glued these onto my shelves one at a time to divide it into 9 what I'll call cubbies. Each cubby ended up being about 5 inches cubed, so if your mugs are bigger or smaller, you may want to adjust as needed. Then I applied Minwax weathered oak wood stain and it was ready to hang on the wall. I used a screw through the back panel to secure this to the wall studs, and I actually recommend using at least 2 screws so that it doesn't twist. I'm not using 2 screws here just because this isn't where I'm putting it permanently, it's just the best place for photos. This project is a great way to use up some scrap plywood, and it makes an excellent gift idea too. This next project is probably one of the simplest scrapwood projects I've ever made. You can use just about any type or size of scrapboard that you have available, so I gathered a variety to make a few different styles. You can make a wooden riser 100 different ways, but I'm going to show you 3 here, starting with the easiest first. For this style, I trimmed my main board in square, then I cut 4 pieces of scrap 2x2 to about 1.5 inches long so that they were cubes. After sanding, I glued and clamped these blocks onto the bottom, one at each corner. And that's literally all there is to it. Of course, if you wanted, you can also cut the top board with some sort of shape, or cut out a handle of some sort to make it a little more interesting. Basically, you can glue wooden blocks, wooden balls, cabinet doorknobs, little furniture feet, pretty much anything at the corners to make this simple style of riser. The next version is my personal favorite. It's making a riser with a waterfall edge. I adjusted my miter saw bevel to 45 degrees and cut a piece off the end. Then I flipped the board over and trimmed off the edge. I repeated for both sides, then I glued the corners together so that the wood grain is continuous up the sides and across the top. I clamped the corners nice and tight, and once it was dry, I sanded them smooth. This is especially fun if you have a board with a unique wood grain pattern like this hickory. The last method is basically just trimming a sliver off each end of the board and gluing it onto the bottom. You can trim and glue this piece on so that it's end grain on each side, like I did with this chunky piece of scrap red oak. Or if you have a wider board, you can rip some strips off each edge, trim them to fit, then glue them along each end. These are so handy to have around the home as little caddies, plant stands, and catch-alls, and they also make really great gifts. I stained them several different colors to have a wide variety of options to gift to friends. This scrapwood project is one that I've been meaning to make for a while. It's a simple desk organizer, and I'm going to use some scrap 1x construction lumber to build it with. These pieces had previously been ripped down to about 7.5 inches wide, so if you just had some scrap 1x8s, this would be very close to the same size. I trimmed a piece about 9.5 inches long from one of my pieces, then I cut 3 smaller pieces to use as dividers. I wanted these divider pieces to be curved, so I used a 5-gallon bucket to trace a curve on one piece and then trimmed it down with a jigsaw. I copied this curve onto my other 2 dividers, then I cut 2 pieces just a little longer, but with the same curve shape, to go on each end of my board. Before attaching the pieces, I went ahead and stained them using Minwax water-based stain in driftwood. Now, there are 100 ways to attach this together, but I didn't want to see any screws or nails on the sides, and to be honest, I just really didn't want to deal with any glue. So I drilled pocket holes in the bottom piece to attach between the 2 side pieces. I used a scrap piece of wood about 2 inches wide to help me evenly space my dividers out while I attach them with screws through the bottom board. You could have used wood glue here as well, but 2-inch long wood screws were more than enough and I didn't have to deal with any squeeze out. And that's literally all there is to it, and now I have a piece to organize my files, notebooks, and mail. Honestly, I should have built this years ago. And that wraps up this year's Scrapwood Summer Series. This is one of my favorite things that we do every year, but it's becoming a little bit more of a challenge to think of new project ideas that I haven't already shared before. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing these, and as always, if you're looking for more project ideas, scrapwood or not, I've got plenty more over on my website, and I will leave a link in the video description below. Stay tuned for plenty more projects coming soon, but until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and happy building.